I never imagined that the darkest moment of my life would also reveal the true face of the man I married. When my world went silent and my body stopped responding, I believed, without doubt, that my husband would be there, holding my hand, praying for me, waiting for me to come back. That belief was the only comfort I had, even when I couldn't open my eyes or speak. Later, I learned how wrong I was. I was lying in a hospital room, surrounded by machines that did the work my body could not. Every breath I took depended on them. Doctors spoke in careful voices, never promising anything. My parents barely left my side. They talked to me, cried to me, and begged me to wake up. They believed I could hear them. They believed I was still fighting. My husband believed something else. While I was trapped inside my own body, he was out living a life that didn't include me. He wasn't sitting beside my bed. He wasn't asking doctors questions or holding on to hope. He was laughing, drinking, and sleeping in hotel rooms that smelled nothing like hospitals. He told himself he deserved comfort. He told others he was coping. And somewhere along the way, he decided I was already gone. The truth is, betrayal hurts differently when you had no chance to defend yourself. I couldn't argue. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even feel anger yet. All I could do was exist, unaware that my absence had become his excuse. People like to believe that love is strongest during tragedy. They say real partners stay when things get hard. I believed that too. I believed marriage meant loyalty, especially when one person was at their weakest. But vows are easy to say when life is comfortable. They are much harder to honor when fear and inconvenience take over. When I finally began to surface from the darkness, I didn't wake up with clarity or strength. I woke up confused, fragile, and hopeful. Hopeful that everything I believed about my life was still true. Hopeful that the man I loved had been waiting for me. What I didn't know then was that my recovery had already started without him. The strength that brought me back had nothing to do with his love or devotion. It came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that would later help me survive the truth. This is not a story about anger alone. It's a story about awakening. About realizing that sometimes the worst betrayal happens when you are unable to see it, and that survival itself can become the beginning of justice. I trusted him with my life. He treated my silence like permission. And while I was fighting to come back, karma was already moving, slowly and patiently, toward the man who thought he had gotten away with everything. Before everything fell apart, my life looked ordinary in the best way. I wasn't rich, famous, or living some perfect story people only see in movies. I was just a woman who believed she had built a solid life with the man she loved. Our marriage wasn't flawless, but it was real. We worked, we argued sometimes, we laughed, and we planned for the future like most couples do. When I met Ethan, he was ambitious but unsure of himself. He had big dreams but not many opportunities. I believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. I was the one who encouraged him to apply for better jobs, who stayed up late helping him practice interviews, who told him failure didn't mean the end. When money was tight, I picked up extra shifts. When he felt defeated, I reminded him of his worth. There were moments when I put my own goals on hold so he could chase his. I didn't see that as sacrifice at the time. I saw it as partnership. Marriage, to me, meant supporting each other when things weren't easy. I trusted that if our roles were ever reversed, he would do the same for me. We talked about the future often. A bigger home. Stability. Growing old together. Those conversations felt safe. I never worried that he would walk away when life became inconvenient. I thought trust was something that grew stronger with time, not something that could disappear overnight. Of course, we had problems like any couple. He worked long hours. Sometimes he came home tired and quiet. Sometimes I felt unseen or taken for granted. But we always found our way back to each other. At least, that's what I believed. I thought the distance was temporary, just a phase caused by stress and pressure. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to confuse routine with security. I thought familiarity meant safety. I thought years together meant loyalty was guaranteed. I never questioned his commitment because he had never given me a reason to doubt it. Or maybe I just didn't want to see the cracks forming. I loved him in a simple, steady way. Not loud, not dramatic. I showed my love through patience, through understanding, through being there when things went wrong. I believed that kind of love was enough to hold a marriage together. What hurts the most is knowing that while I was investing everything into building a future, I never imagined a moment where my life would depend on his character. I never imagined that trust, once broken, could feel heavier than any physical pain. At that time, I truly believed the man I married would never abandon me when I needed him most. The accident happened on a normal day. Nothing felt wrong that morning. I had places to go and small plans in my head, the kind you don't think twice about. One moment I was driving, and the next moment everything went dark. There was no warning, no time to react. Just a sudden break between before and after. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the pain. What I know came later, from the pieces people shared with me once I woke up. My injuries were severe enough that doctors had to put me into a medically induced coma. They said my body needed rest more than anything else. They also said there were risks. No promises. No clear answers. My parents were called before my husband fully understood what was happening. They rushed to the hospital in shock, trying to stay calm while doctors spoke in careful sentences. The waiting room became their second home. They learned the sounds of the machines, the shift changes of nurses, and the quiet fear that comes with watching someone you love lie completely still. While I was unconscious, time moved differently for everyone else. For my parents, every day felt heavy. They sat beside me for hours, holding my hand, talking to me like I could hear them. They prayed out loud. They reminded me of memories, of strength, of how much I was loved. They refused to give up, even when doctors told them to prepare for different outcomes. Ethan was there at first. That's what I was told. In the early days, he showed up, asked questions, and stood quietly in the room. But slowly, his visits became shorter. Then less frequent. Eventually, there were days he didn't come at all. Excuses replaced concern. Work. Stress. Needing space. No one questioned him at first because everyone assumed grief looks different on everyone. As the weeks passed, the absence became noticeable. Nurses stopped recognizing him. My parents stopped asking when he would arrive. They focused on me, on staying strong, on believing that I would wake up no matter how long it took. They never left me alone, even when hope felt thin. Doctors continued to monitor my condition, adjusting treatments, watching for signs of improvement. Sometimes there were small changes. A twitch. A reaction. Enough to keep hope alive, but not enough to celebrate. Every day felt like waiting on the edge of something that might never happen. I was told later that these weeks revealed more than just medical outcomes. They revealed who stayed and who slowly stepped away. While my body was fighting silently, relationships were changing without my knowledge. Choices were being made while I couldn't speak for myself. The accident didn't just damage my body. It exposed the difference between presence and absence, between obligation and commitment. I just didn't know it yet. While I was unconscious, life outside the hospital continued for Ethan in ways I never could have imagined. What started as distance slowly turned into something much darker. He didn't just step away from the waiting room, he stepped into another life. He met Lauren Miles during this time. She knew exactly who he was and what condition his wife was in. There was no confusion, no misunderstanding. He didn't hide the truth. Instead, he used it. He spoke about me like I was already fading, like my existence was a sad story that was close to ending. People felt sorry for him. They listened. They offered comfort. That sympathy became an excuse. At first, he told himself he was just trying to escape the stress. A drink after work. A night out to clear his head. Then those nights turned into parties. Loud music, laughter, and moments where he forgot hospitals even existed. He stayed out late, then overnight. Each time, the space between him and reality grew wider. Lauren became part of that escape. She wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. She was a choice. He chose someone who made him feel alive while I lay still. He chose attention over responsibility. She listened to his complaints, his fears, his version of events. And in return, she gave him comfort without obligation. To the outside world, he played a role. He spoke softly about his wife. He used words like hoping and waiting. He told people the situation was complicated and painful. He allowed them to believe he was suffering quietly. No one questioned the man who looked so tired and sad on the surface. But behind closed doors, there were hotel rooms and laughter. There were mornings he woke up next to someone else, while my parents woke up next to a hospital bed. He learned how easy it was to live two lives when one person couldn't speak. The most painful part is not that he moved on. It's that he did it early. Before there was certainty. Before there was an ending. He didn't wait for answers. He didn't wait for me. He decided his comfort mattered more than my life. Lauren didn't ask him to stop. She didn't ask him to go back. She accepted the story he gave her and stepped into the space I hadn't even left. In her mind, I was already gone. In his, I was an inconvenience. While I slept, choices were made that could never be undone. Trust was broken without confrontation. A marriage was quietly replaced, not by a dramatic ending, but by selfish decisions made in the dark. And all of it happened while I was still breathing. When I finally woke up, it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt slow and confusing, like being pulled out of deep water. My body was heavy. My throat hurt. Sounds came before faces. I heard voices telling me to stay calm, to blink if I could hear them. I didn't understand where I was or how long it had been. The first clear thought I had was simple. I wanted to see my husband. I expected relief on his face. I expected tears, or at least shock. I believed he would be there, holding my hand, telling me how scared he had been. Instead, I saw my parents. Their faces were filled with emotion, exhaustion, and disbelief. They cried when they realized I was awake. They spoke to me softly, like I might disappear again if they spoke too loudly. I waited for him. Hours passed. Then more time. Nurses came and went. Doctors explained things I could barely follow. Still, he didn't show up. I told myself there had to be a reason. Work. Traffic. Stress. I made excuses for him before anyone else had to. When he finally came, something felt wrong immediately. He stood near the door instead of coming close. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He didn't touch me for long. He spoke carefully, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing, but not in a loving way. It felt distant, rehearsed. He said he was glad I was awake. He said it had been hard. He didn't say he missed me. As days passed, the small details began to stand out. He didn't answer his phone when he was with me. He stepped outside to take calls. He checked the time often. His visits were short, and he always seemed distracted. When I asked simple questions, his answers were vague. When I asked where he had been during the worst weeks, he changed the subject. I noticed missed calls on his phone when it was left on the table. Names I didn't recognize. Late-night notifications he quickly dismissed. None of it made sense, but my body was too weak to confront anything. I was still learning how to sit up, how to eat, how to breathe without help. I didn't have the strength to question him the way I wanted to. There was also a strange lack of warmth. He didn't talk about the future. He didn't talk about bringing me home. He acted like my recovery was an interruption to a life he had already adjusted to without me. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet. Just awareness. A quiet realization that something important had changed while I was gone. The man standing in front of me didn't look like someone who had been waiting. I didn't know the truth then. But I knew enough to understand that waking up wasn't the end of the struggle. It was the beginning of seeing things clearly. The truth didn't come out in a dramatic moment. It slipped through quietly, the way painful things often do. I was lying in my hospital bed when a nurse came in to check my /4 and adjust the monitor. She spoke casually, not knowing what she was about to uncover. She asked if my husband was finally visiting regularly again. I didn't understand the question at first. I told her he had been coming when he could. She looked confused and said she hadn't seen him much during my stay, especially not during the weeks I was unconscious. She stopped talking the moment she realized what she had said, but it was too late. The words stayed in the room with me long after she left. That was the first crack. Later that day, another nurse mentioned how often my parents were there compared to before. She said it kindly, but the message was clear. Ethan had not been around the way a husband should be. The image I had been holding on to began to fall apart piece by piece. Still, I said nothing. I needed certainty, not suspicion. That certainty came sooner than I expected. One evening, Ethan stepped outside my room to take a phone call. He thought I was asleep. My eyes were closed, my body still, but my mind was wide awake. His voice dropped the moment he answered. It was softer, familiar, and not meant for me. He told the person on the other end to stop calling so much. He said it wasn't a good time. He said things were complicated now. There was a pause, then a laugh that didn't belong in a hospital hallway. He promised he would explain later. He promised nothing had changed between them. I didn't need to hear the name. I didn't need details. The tone said everything. When he came back into the room, he acted normal. He asked how I was feeling. He adjusted my blanket. He kissed my forehead quickly, like it was a task he needed to complete. I looked at him and realized I was seeing a stranger. The pain I felt in that moment was sharper than anything my body had been through. The accident hurt, but this reached deeper. It wasn't just that he had been unfaithful. It was that he had done it while I couldn't protect myself, while my life was uncertain, while others were praying for me to survive. I wanted to confront him. I wanted answers. I wanted him to admit it out loud. But I didn't. Something inside me told me to wait. I was still healing. I was still vulnerable. And I understood that reacting emotionally would only give him control. So I stayed quiet. I listened more. I watched closely. I let him believe I knew nothing. In that silence, I found a strange kind of strength. I realized that knowing the truth didn't mean I had to reveal it right away. Sometimes, the strongest move is to observe, to breathe, and to let the truth settle before deciding what comes next. The betrayal was real. But so was my resolve. After the truth settled in my mind, I made a decision. I would not rush. I would not confront him while I was still weak and dependent. I understood that my body needed time to heal, but my mind was already awake. I chose patience. I let Ethan believe I was focused only on recovery. I asked the doctors questions in front of him. I talked about physical therapy and pain levels. I acted grateful for his visits, even when they were short. I kept my voice soft and my emotions controlled. To him, I was still fragile, still unaware, still easy to manage. Inside, everything had changed. I started paying attention to small things. Times he arrived late. Excuses that didn't line up. The way he guarded his phone. I didn't argue. I didn't question him directly. I listened. People often reveal the truth when they think no one is watching. My parents noticed the shift in me. They could see I was thinking more than speaking. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. I needed space to understand what I was dealing with. I needed proof, not just feelings. As my strength slowly returned, I began to take control of what I could. I asked to review medical paperwork. I paid attention during conversations with doctors and staff. I listened when Ethan spoke about decisions he had made while I was unconscious. I asked simple questions that seemed harmless but gave me important answers. The hardest part was holding my emotions in. There were moments I wanted to scream. Moments I wanted to cry and ask why I wasn't enough. But I reminded myself that begging would only lower me, and anger would only warn him. I didn't want him alert. I wanted him comfortable. Ethan grew more careless as time passed. He believed I was too focused on walking again to notice anything else. He spoke freely around me. He complained about stress. He talked about needing a break, about feeling overwhelmed. He never once asked how I felt emotionally. That told me everything. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became quieter and sharper, like focus. I wasn't planning revenge out of anger. I was preparing to protect myself. I was learning the truth about my own life, my marriage, and the man I thought I knew. Every day I gained a little more strength. Every day I saw more clearly. I understood that timing mattered. Acting too soon would leave me vulnerable. Waiting would give me options. So I waited. I healed in silence. I gathered what I needed. And I let Ethan believe the story he was most comfortable with, that I was still weak, still trusting, and still unaware. He had no idea that while my body was recovering, my mind was already planning what came next. The follow-up appointment was supposed to be routine. Just another step in my recovery. Ethan came with me, sitting beside me with his usual distracted expression. He looked bored, like this was an obligation he couldn't wait to finish. I stayed quiet, listening more than speaking. The doctor entered with a folder and a serious tone. He reviewed my progress, explained what still needed time, and then paused. He looked at me first, then at Ethan. That pause changed the air in the room. He said there were important decisions made while I was unconscious that needed to be discussed now that I was awake and stable. Ethan nodded casually, clearly not worried. He assumed everything was already handled. The doctor began explaining legal and medical authorizations that had been signed during my coma. Since I was unable to speak for myself, Ethan had been given full authority at the time. The doctor reminded him of that, then continued. Some of those decisions were permanent. Ethan's posture shifted. His confidence faded slightly, replaced by confusion. He asked what that meant. The doctor explained that certain permissions he signed affected control over medical directives and related matters going forward. Because of those choices, things could not simply be reversed. They would now follow a different process, one that no longer depended on Ethan. The room went quiet. I watched Ethan's face as understanding slowly set in. He tried to speak, but nothing came out right away. He asked questions, his voice tense. The doctor answered calmly, clearly, without emotion. These were not punishments. They were consequences of choices made at a time when responsibility required care and presence. The doctor turned to me and explained my options now. For the first time, I was being addressed directly. For the first time, my voice mattered again. I nodded, absorbing everything. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. Ethan tried to interrupt, tried to reframe things, but the doctor stopped him gently. What had been done was documented. What had been signed was valid. Intentions didn't change outcomes. I could see it then. The moment he realized that the control he assumed he had never truly existed. While he was distracted by his own comfort, he had treated important decisions like paperwork. He hadn't thought long-term. He hadn't thought about me waking up. Now I was awake. When the appointment ended, Ethan walked out ahead of me without speaking. His confidence was gone. His silence was loud. He finally understood that while he was choosing convenience, life was still moving forward without waiting for him to be ready. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Balance. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. The power had shifted quietly, without drama. I didn't have to raise my voice or accuse him of anything. His own choices had spoken for him. And for the first time since waking up, I knew that no matter what happened next, I was no longer at his mercy. After that appointment, everything around Ethan began to change. Not all at once, but slowly enough that he couldn't stop it. The confidence he once carried disappeared. He became quiet, distracted, and short-tempered. The life he had been balancing so easily started slipping through his fingers. Lauren was the first to go. Without the comfort and stability he once provided, her interest faded. The late calls stopped. The messages slowed, then ended. When she realized the situation was no longer simple or beneficial, she stepped away without hesitation. There was no loyalty, no patience. The same way she entered his life, she exited it, quickly and without looking back. Ethan tried to hide it, but I could see the change. He stayed out less. He checked his phone more often, only to look disappointed. The escape he had built for himself was gone, and now he was left with reality. Friends began to distance themselves too. People who once sympathized with him started asking questions. His story no longer sounded convincing. I was alive. I was recovering. And his role as the grieving husband no longer made sense. Silence replaced support. Invitations stopped. Conversations became awkward. Through all of this, I stayed calm. I focused on my recovery and my independence. I didn't chase answers. I didn't accuse him. I let the truth surface on its own. One evening, when the house felt heavy with unspoken tension, I asked him to sit down. He looked nervous, like he already knew what was coming. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke slowly and clearly. I told him I knew. I told him I knew he hadn't been there when I needed him. I told him I knew about the other woman. I didn't ask him to explain or defend himself. I didn't insult him. I simply stated facts, one by one, without emotion. He tried to interrupt, but I stopped him. I told him this wasn't a conversation for excuses. It was a conversation for honesty. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was fear. He realized I wasn't broken. I wasn't begging. I wasn't confused anymore. The version of me he thought he could control no longer existed. I told him that betrayal didn't need shouting to be exposed. It only needed truth and time. I told him that while he was making choices for himself, I was learning who I needed to be without him. He had nothing meaningful to say. Apologies came too late and sounded empty. Regret doesn't carry weight when it shows up after consequences. I didn't ask him to leave that night. I didn't need to. His collapse was already happening. Everything he thought he had secured through deception had disappeared. Not because I took it from him, but because it was never built on anything real. Walking away from that conversation, I felt steady. I didn't win through revenge. I won through clarity. And that was something he could never take from me. After everything, I realized the most important choice wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about me. I didn't need to yell, humiliate, or force him to feel guilt. I had lived through the worst betrayal I could imagine, and I had survived. That was enough to claim my own strength. I began making decisions for myself. I returned to my life slowly, piece by piece. I focused on small victories, walking without help, speaking without fear, planning my days without him at the center. Every step reminded me that my survival didn't depend on anyone else. My worth wasn't tied to his choices or approval. I didn't erase the pain. I didn't pretend it never happened. I remembered every moment, every betrayal, every time he had chosen comfort over loyalty. But I also realized that holding on to anger would only trap me in the past. True strength wasn't about making him suffer, it was about reclaiming my life and dignity. I began reconnecting with the world on my own terms. Friends, family, and simple routines became my foundation. I discovered how much power there was in standing quietly, in letting life continue while someone else struggles with the consequences of their actions. Ethan had chosen his path. I chose mine. Walking away didn't feel like giving up. It felt like arriving. Arriving at a place where I could breathe freely, think clearly, and finally trust myself. I didn't need closure from him. I didn't need an apology. The reality of what he lost was punishment enough, and it didn't require my interference. I started to understand something important: the worst things that happen in life often teach the most valuable lessons. Being betrayed, abandoned, and almost broken showed me how strong I truly am. It taught me that self-worth isn't given, it's claimed, nurtured, and defended. It taught me that survival itself can be the beginning of a better life. I look back now and see the accident, the betrayal, and the pain not just as tragedies, but as catalysts. They forced me to grow, to wake up to truths I might never have seen otherwise. I didn't become bitter or cruel. I became wiser, stronger, and more grounded. I learned to value myself above all else. Ethan still exists in my life, but only as a reminder. A reminder that trust can be broken, that people can fail you when you are most vulnerable, and that life doesn't wait for anyone. But I am no longer defined by his actions. I am defined by my survival, my choices, and my ability to rise above. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is actually what saves your life. I lived it. I survived it. And I am stronger because of it.